Hello again, my dear students. I hope everyone is doing fine. This is the continuation of our video lecture on Chapter 3 of our history textbook, Economies and Livelihood. Today, let us discuss the Great Economic Crisis of 1929-1939, page number 144 to page number 147. Let us discuss the economic crisis of 1929-1939 and the British industries. British industries in the post-World Wars, coming up of labor unions, and livelihood of workers in Britain. First, the Great Economic Crisis 1929-1939 and the British industries. By the beginning of 1929, the economic prosperity of Britain and other countries across the globe faced a serious economic crisis. The progress of industrialization in Britain and the West had enabled them to produce more than what the war needed. In fact, the real cause of this unwanted situation was the overproduction by the competitive industrial production by the Western countries. Simultaneously, the purchasing power of the people lost, even if industrial goods were abundantly produced by the industries. This crisis is known in history as the Great Economic Depression or Crisis of 1929-1939. The Great Economic Depression was originated from the United States of America. However, it affected the whole world. The British industries also struggled to adjust to the slump in the international trade. Thousands of British soldiers came home after the First World War and searched for employment. Trade unions launched strikes against the cut in wages. Consequent on the coming of the Great Depression, England could not continue to lead the industrial production. The British monopoly in industry and trade came to a deteriorating situation. Moreover, the underdeveloped countries of Asia, Africa, and South America, which in the pre-World War I period took loans from Britain for their development activities, were now starting to rely on their own economic resources. The slump in the British industry began to revive on the eve of the Second World War. British industries in the post-World Wars. The fruits of scientific development were used by the British industries with an aim to recapture their dying world market. Britain in the 1950s was greatly influenced by the scientific research and findings. No doubt, the process of mass production in England began immediately before the end of the First World War. In fact, the process of mass production in England was taken up at a great speed. She began to produce many things which were not produced before the First World War. Motor car industry became a prosperous industry. The mode of pre-World War I British industries were now strongly replaced by more advanced machinery. Electrical power and improved transport and communication systems greatly helped in the further growth of industries in Britain. The two great wars witnessed the use of various weapons and means of transport, from machine gun to atom bomb, were the products of the industrial West. England also manufactured various war-related goods. Furthermore, many heavy industries were established in Britain during the 1950s. Coming up of labor unions. With the progress of industrialization in England, the industrial workforce began to demand improved working conditions and wages through labor unions. They began to subscribe small amount of money and extended aid to the workers during illness or unemployment. Subsequently, the workers formed organizations for winning improvements by collective bargaining and strikes. The industrial workforce also sought to benefit themselves by political action. For example, they fought against the English laws of 1799 and 1800, forbidding labor unions. The workers struggled to win the right to vote and to extend their political power, was one of the principal factors in the spread of democracy during the 19th century England. Livelihood of workers in Britain. With industrialization, the social and political conditions also changed in Britain and other industrialized countries. In Britain, Farm laborers and artisans flocked to the factories and mills, and they became industrial workers. Towns and cities grew rapidly, and the percentage of farmers in the total population of England declined to a great extent. The English population began to increase fast after the middle of the 18th century, as a result of the progress in medical science and sanitation. Fewer people died in infancy or childhood, and the average length of life increased. Many changes were gradually brought about in the life of the industrial workers. Machines shouldered a great burden of hard work from the muscles of mankind. The change from domestic or handicraft industry to the factory system meant a loss of independence to the workers. The artisans could work whenever he pleased, although the financial needs often drove him to work for long hours. When the artisan became a factory employee, he not only had to work for long hours, but he had to leave his little farm. He lived near the factory, often in a crowded slum area. The worker was forced to work continuously at the pace set by the machine. The long hours and the monotonous toil were a great hardship for the women and children industrial workers. Such changes were particularly hard on the weavers and other skilled workers who sank to the position of factory workers now. They had been independent masters, capitalists in a small manner, and managers of their own business. They were proud of their skills. They saw themselves being forced into factories to do other men's bidding for the same wage as unskilled workers. Laissez-faire was the rule in Britain. Laissez-faire was the doctrine that state interference in industry and commerce should be kept to a minimum level. Adam Smith advocated this policy as an alternative to the restriction of the mercantilism of his time. Adam Smith's view had great influence in Britain until the second half of the 19th century. Factory owners could therefore arrange working conditions in whatever way they wished. Serious problems arose for the workers, such as problems of working hours, wages, unemployment, accidents, employment of women and children, housing and sanitation, etc. Adam Smith was an economist and philosopher born in Scotland. He studied at Glasgow and Oxford and became a professor of logic at Glasgow in 1751. But he took up the chair of moral philosophy the following year. In 1776, he moved to London, where he published An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, 1776, the first major work of political economy. The book examined in detail the consequences of economic freedom, such as division of labor, the function of markets, and the international implication of a laissez-faire economy. Children could tend most of the machines as well as other persons could, and they could be hired for less wage. They were made to work for 12 to 14 hours a day under terrible conditions. A series of laws were passed by the British Parliament pertaining to industrial labor. Beginning in 1833, the worst conditions in British industry had been alleviated. Employers were forbidden to hire children under 9 years of age, and the labor of those under 18 years of age was restricted to 9 hours a day. Women and children were excluded from mine labor, and better arts and safety devices were required in the mines. Government inspectors were provided to ensure that the regulations were followed. After wage earners were given the right to vote in 1867, additional measures were effected for their protection and welfare. With this, let us conclude our class for today. In the next video lecture, we shall discuss industrialization in India. Until then, have a nice day. Thank you.